What?
They can hear you. You're actually live right now on Karnak's stream.
If it would let me in.
If it would let you in?
Hello?
I don't know.
It's not letting me in.
What's not letting you in?
It says you're live, but I'm not.
Refresh the stream.
I did 3 times. 3 bloody times.
See, it's not just me that gets scuffed. Jeez. Hello, MB4 Rec. Hello, Cutie Melon VT. Hello, Emmy. Hello, hello. How's it going? For some reason, Emmy is muted. What do you mean? Karnak is first. No. Oh, you. Listen. Emmy is first because she got the pin. What's going on, chat? What's going on? It's Music Love. Happy birthday, Music Love. Happy birthday.
Oh my god, I forgot. I didn't forget. That's a lie. Happy birthday.
Believe it or not, 6 months in the making. Karnak finally did his ancient history, Egypt homework, and like learned about ancient Egypt. And Wolfie Moriko, resident historian, resident BBC registered historian, registered universal genius of history, Wolfie Moriko. Agreed.
You're chatting me up like this,
and
I'm just like, they're gonna be sorely disappointed by the end of this.
You're a lady of the society.
Okay, true.
Yeah, see, true. She doesn't even deny.
Many history societies.
Wait, well, I'm currently streaming. I'm honored to be streaming with a lady of the society. Hello, Miss Haunted Angel. How's it going? How's it going? All right. Oh, birthday cake for Mio for 5 biddies. Oh, thank you, Amy. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So, hello, everybody. My name's Karnak. I'm a Captain from Ancient Egypt. Child of Bastet. And this is Wolfie Moriko.
Hi.
What's your thing?
Muffing?
What's your thing?
Okay. I am a cozy historian wolf girl from Britain. You know, this accent says it all. And I say macadamia correctly, unlike this man here. So yeah, I like history. I've just finished my master's in history as well, and I've got a busy year ahead of me.
You got a busy year ahead?
I stream when I can. I promise.
No. Now, if you go to Britain, there are 3 ways to have sex. You can have it Wessex, Essex, or Sussex.
Oh, can't I?
But there's no such thing as an all sex, so don't even ask. You have to go to Northumbria or something.
Best behaviour.
See, Emily says I'm not wrong.
For God's sake. He literally said best behaviour before we went live.
Hello, Connor7. How's it going?
Oh, just give me just a second, Connor.
Another second. She wanted all these seconds before we went live. I'm like, look, I'm hitting the fucking button. I'm hitting the button on the hour, okay? Whether you like it or not. Hey, Elclone, what's up? What's up? Oh yeah, Elclone's mum might show up. Jesus, maybe I shouldn't have made that joke about sex. Oh no. So, is everyone keen to learn about ancient Egypt? Yeah. Listen, I roll me as if. Listen, me as if. I'm a man who sticks to his word when it comes to say-so-ness and wholesomeness. I
feel like I've come back and you're lying.
I'm not lying. I was just teaching him the ancient pronunciation of macadamia. The ancient god. It was the ancient god of nuts. Yep. This is 100% fact. The ancient god of nuts, macadamia.
No.
Well, You know what, Wolfie Moriko? Hieroglyphs didn't have consonants, so I can pronounce them however I want. Can't wait for the squad to become a highlight with Kano talking to Wolfie about 3 different styles of oh no. Only a man can something get away with it. Hey, listen, Emmy, that ain't true. Like I've seen you women streaming. I've seen you VTubers.
Close to me.
Miss Haunted Angel got auto-modded repeating what I said.
Oh gosh.
Oh dude, the thing that like the thing that Angel got auto-modded on wasn't even sex. It was 3 ways. Imagine like
I'm not gonna say what I just had flash in my head. We're not saying that. Say so.
Listen.
Say so.
Yeah, say so.
We are.
You know what else we are? Wolfie Moriko.
Yeah.
Students of history, yay!
We are indeed. We are indeed.
What's your favorite thing about history?
Say that again.
What's your favorite thing about history? What do you like about it?
What's my favorite thing about history?
No, like history of the concept. Not like your favorite time period, but what's your favorite thing about like learning history?
I think for me personally, the best way to describe it is I like looking at an object that, say you go to a museum and you see a shoe.
Yeah.
I like to think about who that shoe belonged to. Obviously, it was worn by someone. Who was that person? Where did they live? What was their life like? So I really like just looking back at the lives of people and individuals.
It's like the ultimate.
Personally.
It's the ultimate form of like feet for free. It's going through a museum looking at shoes.
But I like looking at something and thinking, well, this is hundreds of years before I existed.
Do you like looking at men's shoes more or women's shoes?
I like BT. Stop it.
Why are you like this? I don't know Mia's ear fluff, okay? Like
honestly, Mia, like the stream the other day that I was supposed to go back and clip, he said something about chocolate covered feet.
So yeah, and she wanted the clip immediately. She wanted the clip immediately because I was talking about chocolate covered feet. Blackmail purposes. Well, if Wolfie Moriko doesn't like feet, then why is she getting a Klarnet clip about chocolate covered shoes?
For blackmail.
Oh yeah, quote unquote for blackmail.
You act out of line. That clip.
Oh dude,
but
Emmy saw the ad. Emmy saw the ad. Emmy saw the ad. It's real. the ad is real.
I haven't seen it. I kind of don't want to see it either.
You're too busy. You're too busy at the museum. Like, oh, Queen Victoria, such a dainty shape. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she was very small.
Yeah, she was. Although
I'm more interested in her children though. Like, they're very interesting.
Yeah,
especially after the father died.
Karnak's YouTube channel can be added to a blacklist because of this clip. I mean, listen. I'm pretty sure I'm already demonetized. I'm fighting the algorithm. Leave a like and subscribe, you YouTube chads. You 8 people that watch my VODs. I love you all. Like the video. The VOD squad to the rescue. We can beat YouTube censorship. something SJWs. Oh no. Absolutely. I mean, I ain't gonna delete the clip. I'm gonna share the clip on YouTube because in God's green YouTube, he believed in a little something called freedom of speech. I'm gonna get demonetized before I get demonetized. True. All right, Wolfie.
Yes.
Are you ready?
Oh, my dog's barking.
Oh, okay. We gotta give the dog. The dog wants to watch the stream as well, so we gotta.
tell you? I'm having a panic because, like,
why are you having a panic?
The mother is constantly saying my non-wolf name.
Oh, you mean Moriko?
She's saying the other one, and it's stressing me out. I'm like, can you? I tell her every time, stop it, don't.
Don't worry, we can't hear.
She knows to call me Wolfie.
We can't hear. We can't
I'm
hear.
very glad.
We can't hear.
I'm very glad.
All right.
Good.
Are you ready? Because we're gonna
Yes,
we're gonna do some history with Moriko.
How am I supposed to control this cat?
I don't know.
He's uncontrollable, Emmy. He's literally uncontrollable. Damn, he said.
Bam. I said bam. Welcome to my presentation. I made a presentation for you all. I sat down and I worked on it with my... People might remember this from my debut where I used the exact same slide layout.
Oh my god.
I was like, oh man, well, I've done a slideshow before. I'll just use that one. Of course it's the PowerPoint concept. Yeah. Listen. Oh, sorry, no, this isn't Microsoft PowerPoint. This is Google Slides, the superior web-based version. Take that, Microsoft. What's soft exactly? Boom. All right. Uh-oh. I just realized.
Yeah.
They can't necessarily see the entire presentation because I'm covering part of it.
And so am I.
No, it's all right. I'm a pro at avoiding scuff. All right.
Sure he is.
I am. All right, listen. I'm gonna go into full profesh historian presentation mode.
I'll grade you at the end.
Oh, thanks. Anyway, so what is ancient Egypt? So welcome to the history presentation. So what is ancient Egypt? So ancient Egypt is actually a really interesting period of time. It basically spans. So what makes ancient Egypt sort of unique and interesting as opposed to other like periods of history is that ancient Egypt spans a period of time that is twice as long as thinking about like ancient Rome to like the internet. So if you had to have two strings, you have two strings. One string represents like the ancient Rome to the internet, like from you to Julius Caesar, and the other string represents the first pharaoh of history to Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of history. The second string is twice as long as the first string. So it is a huge amount of time. It's an absolutely enormous amount of time. Like the pyramids were old. The pyramids were old when Cleopatra was young. And one of the cool things about ancient Egypt is it's actually the link between the mythological times and the time of history. It's because there's a lot of things that happened. Like ancient Egypt actually goes into the kingdoms of ancient Egypt actually go into prehistory. Because there's a period of time in between man's evolution, in between like our funny little evolution, to when we decided to write stuff down. There's a period, and I don't know what it's called, but it's prehistory basically. And Egypt was founded at some point in prehistory. It's a long time when the 2,500-year-old Andy said it's old. A true herbivore. And so, actually, one of the first things we know about ancient Egypt, like one of the very first things we know, is the plate of Nama. So Nama, you know, I might talk about Nama like for a little bit, but like there's not much we know about Nama. What we know about Nama was we found his grave, and he has a plate in it. And the plate depicts Nama killing, killing some dude. And what the plate represents is the unification of the two kingdoms of Egypt, because Egypt is actually two kingdoms. Is the upper kingdom and the lower kingdom of Egypt. And there was we are a very warlike species. One of the first things we know about history, like where history starts, is Nama's conquest and unification of Upper and Lower Egypt to create the Old Kingdom. What we today call the Old Kingdom, he would have called it the modern kingdom. Yeah. So melon. So this is a fun game I have. This is a fun game I have for the slides. A bunch of the slides are going to have like some cool artwork. And the cool artwork depicts a god or goddess of some description. And the question is, Wolfie Moriko, who is this god? Who do you reckon?
Oh, God.
Oh, don't ask me questions.
I mean, the sun in the background would make me think something to do with the sun, but...
Yeah, she is. One of her aspects is the sun. But you know what? Not knowing which of the 2,400 gods of Egypt that this is, like, it's fair.
I only really know the one to do with like Saturnalia and stuff.
Yeah. I will tell you at the end of the slide, but chat, you're allowed to guess as well. So who is the god? Who is the god depicted here?
Show me up, chat. Do it.
Absolutely. There are more Egyptian gods than there are years. Yes, there are a lot of Egyptian gods. I'll get into why later on. So, when we talk about the start of history, like when we talk about like the action of creating history, what we're doing is we're talking about the action of creating a record, creating memories, creating the stories that sort of guide us in life. Because one of the main advantages of intelligence, because we are a creature of intelligence, is that we have this thing called communication, and like sort of one of the only things we can do really is communicate. We can communicate and use tools. That's what sets us apart from animals. And when we figured out how to write communication down, then we found that we could transfer wisdom. Instead of just transferring wisdom from, like, say, father to son or mother to daughter, we could transfer wisdom from 2 generations ago, 4 generations ago, 5 generations ago. And so history is the action of creating this transference. Now, part of the interesting things about history is like, because I did the same thing when I did mathematics. I sort of got into the history of mathematics. I was like, well, how did these people figure out all these funny numbers? Like, where did all these numbers come from? How did like the ancient mathematicians think? Like how did they create? How did they create like mathematics like as I know it today? And history has a similar story. Like there's a history of the historians themselves, which Wolfie Moriko is at the end of the. She's at the cusp of the tradition, because she herself is a historian, remembering things and studying things, and creating the transference of wealth, transference of knowledge. And the story of Egypt, as we know it today, is also the story of the study of history, because it's sort of like an interesting parallel. Because our understanding of Egypt actually changed over time.
Yes.
So, goddess has been found, says Wolfie Moriko. Ooh, you found the goddess. So, Xenophon. So Xenophon and Nineveh. So this is a story. So this happened in about 600 BC. Okay, so Xenophon was a Greek mercenary. He was a Greek mercenary fighting the Persians. Back in 600 BC, like everyone's favorite hobby was fighting the Persians, because they were a bit of a menace.
Sounds about right.
And Xenophon had just been like his unit or whatever got blasted, and they had to retreat. And so he's retreating with a bunch of men, and they decide to head to this little place in between two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. And in between Tigris and Euphrates, they found some walls. I'm like, oh shit, what are these walls? And in Xenophon's writing, we find that he intimately describes this ancient and desolate city where life once teemed. It was ruins. Like there was a grand palace. There were gardens everywhere. There were houses. There were obviously walls. It was well defended. There were fortifications. And Xenophon didn't realize it, but he'd actually just stumbled on the ancient city, well, then ancient city of Nineveh. And Nineveh, only 200 years prior, had been destroyed by a group of people called the Medes. And this was the ruin of the civilization of the Assyrians. And if you want to know where this is, like in the world, because this all happened in the world, this is all real history. I'm talking about what we now know today as modern-day Iraq. And Xenophon was just west of Baghdad. And the interesting thing about Xenophon's writing about Nineveh, because obviously this has very little to do with Egypt, except that the Assyrians were like, you know, the Assyrians had to deal with the Egyptians, and the Egyptians had to deal with the Assyrians. Okay, they had a lot of interactions. Is you just have to think, like, if you cast your mind back 200 years to the 19th century, we know everything about the 19th century. Like we know about, for example, Beethoven. We know about the American Civil War. Well, we know about, you know, the early Americas. We know about the other things happening in the 19th century, like France, England, Spain. Like, listen, my 19th century history ain't that great. Wolfie's is much better than mine because it's that period. But like, we can tell you giant Wikipedia articles. Giant Wikipedia articles have been written about the 19th century, okay, and it's been remembered and recorded in, like, you know, full like 4K dynamism, like the like every culture on Earth, what they wrote, what they thought, what they were arguing about, their economics, their politics. We know everything about the 19th century. But Xenophon and Nineveh was the same. That was the same distance of time. And Xenophon had no idea that he was in Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrians. Anyway, so the other thing I've got written here, like the other sort of interesting period, the other interesting historians I sort of put down were Bede and Gildas.
Oh, I recognise those names.
Yeah.
Why do I?
Well, that's because Gildas. So Gildas was a monk who lived in sub-Roman Britain, and he wrote the excommunication of Britain, I think it was. Basically, Gildas was none too happy about the let's say the spiritual direction of the British people. He was a little bit unhappy about it, so he wrote a big book about it. And in the book, Gildas describes the start, or like, he doesn't, because the British kings and stuff, they didn't really start. They just sort of evolved out of the Dark Ages, and then William the Conqueror sort of became one of the kings of Britain. That's look. My medieval history, pretty bad.
It's a confusing time.
It's a confusing time.
I wouldn't even.
Anyway, the reason I wrote Bede and Gildas here is because they would have had a different perspective on Egypt to Xenophon in Nineveh. So to Xenophon, Egypt was a neighbor. It was like Xenophon could literally hop on a boat, go to Egypt, and like walk around in Thebes. But Bede and Gildas, well, these guys are half a world away in Britain. Absolutely in Forak. Bede and Gildas living in Britain, well, what they remembered was the old Roman Empire, because Gildas existed right at the end of the Roman Empire, and Egypt to them would have been a state of Rome. Well, it's just part of the empire, well, part of the old empire, I should say, because they thought the empire is old and going away. And so their perspective was that Egypt was just sort of the money source. It was the money source of of Rome, basically. So, listen, I'm not gonna lie. Egypt, pretty rich country, because of where it's geopolitically situated. Egypt had a lot of wealth to let's say share or keep to itself. A lot of Roman governors and emperors were made and broken on how they handled the Egyptian economy. And Bede and Gildas, they never wrote about Egypt specifically. But I'm just saying where they were in history and like how they would have understood or interacted with, as it was then known at the time, Egyptos. And then what happened after that was around 600 AD. Around 600 AD, there was a new religion that took over the Arabian Peninsula, and various caliphates rose and fell through a complicated series of wars. And knowledge of Egypt sort of fell out of the Western tradition. Like between Bede and Gildas and Napoleon is a period of about 700, 800 years. Yeah, about 700, 800 years, because Napoleon was in the 18th century. And Napoleon, for his own reasons, wanted to conquer part of the Ottoman Empire. And the part of the Ottoman Empire he wanted to conquer was Egypt. Yay! And so Napoleon, as part of his, and so Napoleon would have thought of Egypt as just an Ottoman, this old Ottoman territory that was taken, hundreds of years ago. So traditionally, from Napoleon's point of view, Egypt is and always was just part of the Ottoman Empire. And in order to quote-unquote liberate it, as he would say, Napoleon took a group of 1 to 200 scientists, including a mathematician called Gaspard Monge, down into Egypt with them to basically, I guess, un-Islamize Egypt. I don't think it was very successful though. and famously, Napoleon's men used the Sphinx as target practice, because what Napoleon found wasn't the Ottoman Empire. What Napoleon found, because typically what Napoleon expected to find was a bunch of mosques, and he definitely found a bunch of mosques, and he found various artifacts of Islamic rule in Egypt. But what he and his scientists also found were buildings that were many, many times taller than the Eiffel Tower. He found the old tombs. He found a culture more ancient than he was probably expecting. He probably wasn't expecting to find the old Egyptian empire just sort of tucked here, in between Mount Sinai and the Mediterranean Sea. And what this led to was now that Egypt was temporarily, because it got reconquered, it was temporarily a French colony. What this led to was this concept in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century called Egyptomania, because when the Western scientists, like the period is now called Orientalism, but sorry, it's now called Orientalism because what these people found was known at the time as the Orient. Like the period, the area was you have Egypt, Sinai, the Arabian Peninsula, the Levant, and Turkey, modern day Turkey. This is all known as the Orient. And all of this new research and discovery about the Orient was known as Orientalism, where Western scientists of the Western tradition, scientists of the Enlightenment, went over to the Orient to sort of spread the Enlightenment as they like as you do when you're doing propaganda and you conquer people. But they went over to spread the Enlightenment, and what they found with the scientific method that they were introducing was all these old cultures and traditions that actually predated Islamic rule of Egypt. And what they found specifically was that Egypt was linked to, it went all the way from Islam back to Rome, so because they found evidence of Roman baths, and it went back even further into the annals of history, into its own history, where it was its own separate nation. And in fact, what they found was that it never actually stopped going back in history. Like, it went back to what we know as the beginning of civilization. And so from Xenophon, who thought of Egypt as, oh yeah, it's just another nation, like it's just another nation in the world, all the way to Napoleon and, you know, more modern day Orientalism, where we found people that had existed farming on the River Nile for the last 6,000 years. And if you think about it, it's probably reasonable to say that ever since man developed agriculture, we have been farming on the River Nile. There has been some family, some group of people, some group of people, some nation that has wanted or needed to farm barley, wheat, and the rest from the Nile River. And if you think about this one continuous link from prehistory to modern day, the modern day state of Egypt, it's actually quite remarkable, especially considering all of the when you consider like everything that happened to this nation. All right. And so this is like so that was like the story of the history of, that's like the story of the history of Egypt. And so this goddess, by the way, with Moriko, I didn't see it in the chat. Did you figure out who it was?
Is it Isis?
It's Isis. It's Isis. Yes. Linked with fertility, motherhood, the sun, and magic and healing. Trying to get every bit of information actually gets lost time. True. All right. So to understand Egypt, I think it's useful to look at a map. Because, well, when you're understanding any region of the world, you actually want to look at a map. Because when you look at a map, what you get is you get the sense for where these people like sort of were in the world and like what they would interact with. And one thing you look at when you look at the map of ancient Egypt is Lower Egypt is north of Upper Egypt, which is kind of weird. Hey, Keisha Bug, how's it going? You see the title, Fertile Crescent? It's called the Fertile Crescent. That's the name of it. All right. So this is the map of Egypt. Now, why is Lower and Upper Egypt the wrong way around? Do you know the answer, Wolfie? I know you weren't expecting a quiz. I'm not going to quiz you on every little thing.
Yeah, I'm getting quizzed here.
You're getting quizzed. I'm sorry.
I haven't done Egypt since I was in like primary school.
That's fair. So the reason is...
Although, could it be that everything's at the...
Hmm?
I want to say, like, everything's at the upper end, like, civilization-wise.
No.
That's probably wrong.
Lower Egypt was typically more powerful than Upper Egypt.
Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know then.
Yeah. Well, I didn't do it because I sort of wanted to do it, but I didn't really know how to do an animation. But okay, so cast yourself back into primitive man. Egypty Moriko. So basically what happened was the Egyptians had no concept of north. They had no concept of north being up or south being down. They didn't have lodestones. They hadn't invented that. And what they thought was that water was like the fundamental source of life, the fundamental source of everything. And so it made sense to them that the bottom of the world was the Mediterranean Sea.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the top of the world is, well, the Nile is heading towards the top of the world.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you look at it that way, it makes more sense that, oh, okay, yeah. So a lot of Egypt's like, this is the bottom and this is the top. And it wasn't until we developed magnetism that we realized, oh, okay, north actually points the other way. Egypty Moriko, one name added to the list. True.
That list is getting bigger.
So why is this called because the Fertile Crescent's actually up here. So this region here. So this is Egypt. Obviously, this is North Africa, as we would know it today. There's the Red Sea. There's Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, if you're a biblical scholar, this is where Moses went to get the commandments from God. And this here is Canaan. This is the promised land of the Israelites. And the reason this is called the Fertile Crescent, the Orient is called the Fertile Crescent, is basically there's a series of rivers and periodic flooding, which creates ideal conditions for farming. And how strong your nation was directly related to like how big your crop yield was, basically.
Yes, it was.
Now one thing I wondered when I was getting into ancient Egypt is like, why did they call themselves Egypt? Right? Like, what's the meaning of like Egypt? Because England makes sense. It's the land of the Angles, right? Because they were called the Angles. So yeah, this is Angleland, obviously. France makes sense as well because they were populated by the Franks and the Gauls and a bunch of other tribes. But so who were what was the tribe? What were the people of Egypt? And I found out Egypt is not what they called themselves. They didn't call themselves Egyptians. They called themselves something related to Kemet. And Kemet literally means black land. And obviously, because it's Africa, you might think, oh, well, it's talking about the color of the skin, right? But no, the black land in Kemet actually refers to the soil around the Nile, because the soil around the Nile Delta and the soil around the Nile, it's all like pitch black, because it's rich in nitrogen.
Didn't know that.
And the Egyptians themselves considered their skin to be red. So whenever you look at pyramid paintings or anything like that, the Egyptians paint themselves red. They paint the Nubians. So the Nubians were just south of Upper Egypt, and the Nubians were conquered a couple times in the Middle Kingdom, I think. And the Nubians, they colored them dark skin, so they had black skin in the Egyptian mind. And then the Greeks and the Turks up here, they were white. So the Egyptians had like three concepts of color, which was red themselves, white, and black. Now, the cool thing about the Nile. So one of the main strengths of Rome was roads. So one of the ways Rome did everything was they had empire-spanning roads that were like ultimate straightness, where you could just walk along the road and you're perfectly safe. You're not going to get molested by thieves and bandits, and you can take your trade cart along this beautiful cobblestone road maintained by the empire. Now, one of the reasons for Egypt's strength as an early nation is they didn't have to invent the road. They already had a national highway. Do you care to guess what the national highway was, Wolfie Moriko?
It's the Nile, isn't
Obviously, it's the Nile, yay! Because the way the Nile works is the current of the Nile flows from the current flows from the Mediterranean Sea all the way down south to the end of it. But the wind flows north. So if you're going south, you furl your sails up and you just row down. But if you're going south, you just furl your sails up and like follow the current. But if you're going north, you unfurl the sails and you just sail on up. And so all you need is a linen cloth and a little boat, and you can take your goods all the way from the Valley of Kings up to Thebes. And one of the things that made Egypt the great breadbasket of Rome wasn't just the fertile lands, but you see this little place here called the Red Sea. The Red Sea is the main shipping route from the Roman Empire to India, and eventually to China. But I don't think the West hadn't interacted with China yet. And so, if you want spices from India, it's got to come in through Egypt, which means you get to pay taxes on it. Yay, import taxes, woo! And so Rome was able to tax spices twice. So since they could tax spices when it hit Egypt, then tax it again when it hit the mainland in Italy. And so because the Nile was such an important like focal point of Egyptian society, a lot of their stuff is based around water. Now, one of the have you ever noticed that the sky is blue, Wolfie Moriko?
Yes.
Yes, it is. And
though not often in Britain. There are two creation stories in the Bible, right? And in one of the creation stories, it's said that God separated the waters from the waters. Yes. Now,
what that means is that actually comes from like Mediterranean ideas, because remember the Israelites who ultimately wrote the Bible were living here in Canaan, and they were influenced by Egyptian culture, and Egypt had the same concept of the waters and the waters, because what the waters and the waters means is that you have the water that's all around you in the sea. This is the groundwater. This is the water that goes to the underworld. And then you have the water of the sky, the firmament. There's like water up there. And Egypt is unique in that the sun god Ra, the sun god, instead of flying through the sky, what he does is he sails his boat on the waters of the sky. And what you'll find as well is that when an Egyptian thinks of like the ancient times, like chaos, the chaotic emptiness of like right at the start of the universe, what we think as modern humans is we think of we think of space, like space, the great nothingness. What an Egyptian would think of is being underwater, because the water. Oh no! Don't say my tail's lucky. The water is the very origin of everything. It is. The water is primordial chaos. And it's also the bringer of life, because the bringer of prosperity, because the Nile floods every year to make the land black, which would give them food. So water brings life. It is the nothingness of chaos. It is the thing that is up in the sky carrying the sun. So water is like one of the most important things to an Egyptian's understanding of cosmology. Now, Egypt obviously had a lot of neighbors, and I'm not really sure what I was going to say about this point. Like, basically, Egypt interacted with a lot of people. Like, it was sort of there. It's sort of all over ancient history, where like everybody knows about the Egyptians. So like, there's the Assyrians. So the Assyrians, they were a brutal empire in the they were a brutal empire just north of Arabia. And a lot of the history of Egypt's new kingdom is conflict with the Assyrians and the Hittites. The Hittites are the modern day Turks. The Assyrians are the modern day. The Hittites became the Turks eventually, and the Assyrians became the Iraqis. The Israelites, obviously, they're here in the Levant, which is where the modern state of Israel is. And then the Sea Peoples. So the Sea Peoples, this was like a migration that happened from probably Europe, Greece and Rome, and they sort of invaded from the sea. And the Greeks, obviously the Greeks under Alexander the Great, eventually conquered Egypt to create the Ptolemaic dynasty in the late period. Hey, it's raid, yay! Hello, Dendro.
Just raided with 16 new cheeses.
I hope you're all following Dendro Bunny VT. It's illegal not to follow. It's illegal. The Pharaoh's going to get you.
He really is. He's scary when he wants to be.
Anyway, so a lot of the records we actually have from ancient Egypt are like them sort of associating or like fighting or like military propaganda around how they can totally beat up the Assyrians. So slavery in Egypt was the next point I had, because a lot of people they sort of get the wrong impression of Egypt, because I think a lot of people, like, their first interaction with Egypt is probably like learning the Christian tradition of Egypt, where Egypt is the great slavers of the Israelites. At least this is certainly like how I first encountered Egypt, was playing Sid Meier's Civilization, and B, learning about the Israelites in Egypt, like through the Bible. And if you read the Bible, you would think that Egypt is like mostly slaves, like 90% of Egyptians are just enslaved. That's definitely not the case. There were a lot of people who were not slaves in Egypt. Specifically, so slavery in Egypt and slavery in the ancient world did exist, obviously. And what we know, because I believe the current consensus is that a lot of the ideas of slavery in the Bible, so like you have this thing where you could sell yourself into slavery to pay off a debt. That's called bonded slavery. Slavery can only last 7 years. The king can enslave you for a period of time, and then he has to let you go. And of course, if you conquer a people, then you can take those people in as what's called chattel slaves. So a lot of these concepts originally came from Egypt, we think. So we think the way slaves interacted in Egypt was what I've described. So you could, if you were in debt, like suppose you owe like the local lord, you like killed his mule or something, and so if you kill somebody's mule, they can enslave you to do labor for them for a certain period of time. You pay off the mule, and then you go back to being a free citizen. Egypt definitely had a large workforce of artisans, sculptors, potters, and professionals and farmers, because they didn't have the hierarchical sense of ownership that you see in other societies. So there wasn't like, in the Middle Ages we had serfdom, where like these people were like all linked to the land, and then they had to pay taxes to like a baron, who then had to pay taxes on his land to like somebody up, and it's like big hierarchy. It wasn't like that. So people did for better or like, because there wasn't really a sense of ownership, because there wasn't any coinage in Egypt. Like wealth was counted in like the number of bushels of grain that you had in storage. But there was definitely like, you didn't owe grain to anybody. Like you had to pay taxes to like the government, and then the government provided services for you. And so like, the last bullet point, what is wealth in ancient Egypt? So interesting thing, humans didn't always use coins to trade stuff. We didn't necessarily have like an idea of like, this is a minted coin from the government and I can trade it for like some stuff. What Egyptians did is they had a bartering system. So if you have a pretty rock, you can trade your pretty rock for some wheat. And then I can use this wheat and I can trade all this wheat for a cow. And then I can trade some cows for a wife. They had dowries in ancient Egypt where you had to pay to marry somebody. So the amount of wealth that you had was basically what you could grow, because you could take what you grew to the bazaar and trade it for anything else you might want. Which is, I mean, we would consider that to be like an inefficient form of commerce, because you have to carry all the shit around. Because if you can imagine, imagine hopping on the bus and you want to go across town, and so you give the bus driver a guitar, and he's like, "Oh no, you've overpaid me." So he gives you back he gives you back a Super Nintendo. It's like, I'm pretty sure a Super Nintendo is equivalent difference in price between a guitar for a trip across town, I think. And then you have like millions of these exchanges. Obviously, like, this only works in like a limited commodity society like Egypt, but there were lots of commodities to trade for, but it was still a limited commodity society as we'd understand it. Now, one of the things that is always a mystery, and one of the things that sort of, if you go to people who don't have much information, they're gonna try and tell you that the pyramids were an ancient power source designed by aliens so that they could transport hyperdimensional spaceships like through like warp space. I did a little bit of research on like, how did they actually build the pyramid? And it turns out if you want to build a pyramid today, what you're going to need is 5 million tons of limestone, 8,000 tons of granite, and 500,000. You're also going to need a few genius architects like Imhotep to design your pyramid for you. A lot of the arguments for the conspiracy say that, oh, well, like, you know, you literally can't move these blocks. It's like, well, you can. You just sort of push them along, and you put logs underneath them and you just push them along. There are ways to build ramps in the pyramid. So you build the ramp such that like the pyramid grows like around the ramp, and then you fill in the ramp last, and then like there's your pyramid. And what you'll get for all your effort. What you'll get for all your effort is a tomb with 3 rooms in it. Because even though the pyramids are absolutely enormous monuments of like man's ability to stack rocks on top of each other, there's actually not that many chambers in the pyramid. True, Ambivorek. So if you want an equivalent for like how expensive the pyramid was, you have to imagine taking the entire GDP of your nation. Take the entire GDP of your nation for 40 years and dedicate it to one building. And just think how much you could build with 40 years worth of GDP. For reference, I'm pretty sure America's GDP right now is like 12 trillion. So 12 trillion dollars times 40, and that's how much it costs to build a pyramid. Like your entire nation's labor went into this. And for those saying like, well, why don't we just build a pyramid today? Well, we can actually. Well, all you lamenting stoneheads on Twitter. We absolutely do. We absolutely can build pyramids today, and it's way easier than you might think. So the Luxor is a hotel in Las Vegas, and it's about the same. They actually built it like the Pyramid of Giza, and it's about the same size. It's a little bit smaller, but they were able to build a pyramid with 2 years, 3,500 workers, and $300 million, which compared to the GDP in the 1990s is like less than 1%. So we've gone from, So we've gone from the entire nation's GDP for 40 years to able to be done by a single company in 2 years. So yes, we absolutely can build pyramids, and we have built a pyramid, and the Luxor is way better than the pyramids because you can play video games in it. There's 4,000 rooms instead of 3 of them, and the Luxor includes its own sphinx, whereas the losers back in ancient Egypt had to build their own sphinx separately. Oh, you've seen the Luxor Hotel is pretty impressive. Anyway, so yes, the Egyptians did build the pyramids. It's not an ancient power source. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to burst on your parade. It is possible for ancient man to build these monumental structures. I got another god here as well, if you want to guess him.
Oh gosh.
So. Go on the hunt. So when you talk about ancient Egypt, it's because we're talking about such a long period of history, it's useful to sort of break up. It's useful to break up sort of what period of ancient Egypt you're talking about. And so the historians of the 17th through 20th centuries came up with the period system. Because what they realized was that whatever society it was that built the pyramid, it existed way before the society that were building these statues, which existed way before the society described in classical texts like Cleopatra. And so when you talk about ancient Egypt, you're talking about the early dynastic period. So this is the tablet of Dharma, the first ever recorded thing. Well, I shouldn't say it's the first ever recorded thing. It's just like this is generally considered to be like the start of Egyptian history. And then you obviously have prehistory before this, but we don't know much about it. You have what's called the Old Kingdom, happening after that. And then you have these other periods here. So basically, the period system is a little bit hard to remember. It's hard to remember like what goes where. Oh, I've got another god. So, did you get the god, Wolfie?
It was like Amun-Ra, but then I'm like,
that's not Amun-Ra.
it doesn't look like him now. Yeah, I don't know.
It's Osiris, god of the dead, the god of mummification.
Oh, I should have known.
And he's notable by his green skin. Which...
Oh, it's green?
Yes, it's green. It's green skin. The green skin signifying that Osiris brings fertile waters to the Nile. Oh, this one's really mean. This one's really hard.
Oh no.
Anyway, instead of the loser academic period system, I've got my own period system. Okay. Basically, if you want to summarize Egyptian history, it goes, there are a bunch of people who built some pyramids. Then there was Pharaoh's Revenge, where they had a big expansion period. Then you have, if you close your eyes and think of what is ancient Egypt, like what does ancient Egypt look like? Well, like what happened in ancient Egypt? You've got ancient Egypt happening here after the Pharaoh's Revenge. So this is where most people like actually interacted with Egypt. So this is where the Hittites, the Assyrians, and like all the stories of conquest and stuff are. That's in it. That's here. And then after this, with the Greco-Roman period and beyond, this is Hollywood movies. Okay, so if you watch a Hollywood movie, you're probably watching a Hollywood movie about the Greco-Roman period, because there are a bunch of I think you call them Hollywood exploitation movies, and they were all set. They all centered around Cleopatra. They centered around Ptolemy, Alexander the Great's conquest. That all happened here in the Hollywood movie section of Egyptian history. If you want to understand in more detail what happened in all these periods of history, absolutely, and before. If you want to understand what happened in these periods, it's quite difficult because Egypt wasn't just one society. It like from the very first. Remember, the very first thing we know about ancient Egypt is that the Nama plate literally describes the unification of two societies, and then beyond that, the existence of this intermediate period is literally describing a period where the pharaoh lost all their power. So the pharaoh lost all their power at the end of the pyramid era, and in this quick period here, there are a whole bunch of regional governors which were then reunified under Pharaoh's Revenge. And then like a whole bunch of statues were built, a bunch of statues and temples were built here. The pharaoh lost their power again, and then they got it back again. conquered a bunch of people, did a bunch of wars, and then they lost their power again. And then they got conquered by the Persians, then they got conquered by the Greeks. So it's difficult to, unless you're doing a really concise history like that, it's difficult to tell just one story about Egypt. Because it's more interesting, I think, to think of like, all right, well, somebody living in the Old Kingdom, like how did they exist? What did they eat? Like who did they care about? Like what were they doing? And that to me has always been like the more interesting. That's always been the more interesting question of like how did these people exist in ancient Egypt, rather than like who conquered who and like who said what about whose bum. Because yeah, the grand tale of military history in Egypt, it's yeah. I've already said it. All right. Did you get the god?
It's not Mahat, is it?
No, it's not Mahat.
No.
Yes, Iron Spartan. Who is it? No, the goddess is not Wolfie Moriko. Although she is a goddess. Oh.
That's so sweet.
Oh. Come on, Iron Spartan. Who is it? Isis. No, it is not Isis. Isis gets auto-modded.
We've had Isis.
Isis is close though. She is linked to Isis. It's not Mahat.
Not the goddess of scorpions.
It is not the goddess of scorpions.
Goddess of destruction.
Ooh, she's linked with chaos, but not destruction specifically. She's married to destruction.
Oh. There's too many. There's blimmin' too many.
There are. This is the goddess Nephthys.
I haven't even found that one on any list.
Nephthys. Nephthys is one of the most important gods in the pantheon. She is the wife of Set, the sister to Isis, and the lover of Osiris. Her domains are mourning, as in mourning, mourning. Her tears purify the dead and help them off into the afterlife. And I don't know much else about Nephthys, but yeah, she's the goddess of mourning. So whenever you see an Egyptian tomb, you'll generally see a symbol of Nephthys there, because Nephthys is there to mourn for the pharaoh.
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense.
And so, like, what I've told you is like a brief history of like 6,000 years, right? Sorry, 3,000 years, 3,500 years. Because 6,000 years is like that includes the prehistory, but we don't talk about the prehistory. And so when you talk about 3,000 years, and like why I sort of glossed over it, is because there's not much we can say like concretely about like how Egyptians lived. Because if you think about what we know about Egypt and where we know it from, well, what we know about Egypt is more or less what people discovered from the 18th century onwards, because we mostly use Enlightenment sources and beyond. And what they had to work with was the artwork on all the tombs that they found. They had the stories of the pharaohs. They had the classical sources. They found out the names of high priests. Like understand, they couldn't even read Egyptian writing until like the 20th century. So there was like a period of 250 years where they couldn't even read Egyptian writing. Like the hieroglyphs were just like funny pictures, like one after the other. They knew that there were some giant pyramids there. And other than that, they had like ruins and artifacts. So they had like arrowheads, walls. They knew that like there were Roman bathhouses there, so they knew this was the state of Rome, for example. And if you compare 3,500 years of time for an entire nation against Abraham Lincoln, we know literally everything about Abraham Lincoln, okay? We know the composition of that man's fecal matter, sort of thing. we know that Abraham Lincoln's mother died of milk sickness. We know the biographies of his parents. We know where Abraham Lincoln was educated when he moved from Kentucky to Illinois. We know that he was like in love with a woman named Anne Rutledge, who passed away early. We know that he was married to Mary Todd. We know all about his career in law. We know his thoughts and writings. And we're not even halfway through his life. We're not even up to the American Civil War. And like I ran out of space on the slide to see what we know about Abraham Lincoln. So like when you talk about Egypt, there's like vast gaps of knowledge, and there's vast gaps that you just sort of have to fill in with. And this is, in my opinion, this is the fun part of Egypt, is that these gaps is where you have to use your imagination. Because what you have to remember is that evolutionarily speaking, there is no difference between you, me, or an ancient Egyptian. We're the same level of development, we're the same intelligence. We have the same abilities in terms of like reasoning, mathematics, logic, and everything else. It's just that you're born today, and the ancient Egyptian was born 5,000 years ago. And so you can actually think and try and step into the life of an ancient Egyptian. Here's another god. This one should be easy. Because what we know about ancient Egypt is actually, we know a fair bit. Like we know at least enough such that we can like imagine an Egyptian life. So we know what they did. Like we know that. Okay, well they had to eat. So there was definitely farming. And we know what they traded because they used to brag about it. So you know, we know they had figs, and they had wheat, and they had barley. We know what fruits are available. We know what's available in the region. We know their level of technology. We know what they could build. They could build giant pyramids. They could build awesome statues. They could build monuments. They could build mastabas and temples. We know that they would need to organize their society. So we know they had like a governor system. We know they had pharaohs. We know they had high priests. We know they had some sort of religious institutions, and they had temples where they worshipped. We know that if you're rich, you get to learn how to write. We know that much. We know they had some sort of administration, some sort of system of laws around slavery, and obviously like conflict resolution. We know how their commerce worked. Well, we know how they traded stuff. And we also know we've also split up the sort of political periods into distinct groups. So like we know like somebody living in one of the intermediate periods would act differently to somebody living in the Middle Kingdom. And we also know roughly through various techniques when monuments were built. So here's the god Wolfie.
I don't know.
Anyone else?
It's not Anubis, is it?
It's not Anubis, no.
Oh, it looks like Anubis.
It does look. It looks a bit like Anubis, yes. But the it's not Anubis. It's not Anubis. All right. Anyone else want to guess? No, it's not. No. Anyone else want to guess?
I can't pronounce that word.
Oh,
It's with a T.
no, it's not. It's not Thoth.
It looked like them as well.
No, the creature is so the creature that he is actually named after the god.
That?
It's not Anubis clan. Yes, it is Set. It's Set. Correct.
Oh,
This is a Set, god of chaos and destruction, god of storms. And the creature that he is the Set animal. There's no animal that is Set. He is simply an amalgamation of different creatures to underlie his chaotic nature. He is also the killer of Osiris. So Osiris back here, the reason he's the god of death is because Set killed him. And he's the husband of Nephthys. They really set him up to a new species. Exactly. He's also the god of foreigners. So if there was a foreign goddess, and Egypt conquered the land, that goddess would be married to Set. One such goddess was Astarte, or Ishtar. Ishtar is the goddess of life for the Babylonians. And so Egypt, in one of the things in the New Kingdom, one of the periods in the New Kingdom of war with one of the Ramseses, they conquered part of the Levant, and as part of that conquest, they stole a bunch of monuments to Ishtar, which they pronounced as Astarte. And the Egyptian tradition is that Astarte for that period was married to Set. So Set would get many wives, because every time Egypt conquered a land, Set would get a new wife. So I had to go at it. I had to go at constructing an Egyptian life. And I came up with Hem. And you can sort of construct like a life, because like you sort of have to close your eyes and like imagine this person having a life. Like you can wake up and sort of see the Egyptian sun above you, and feel the soil of the Black Land underneath you. Like every year there's a Nile festival, like dedicated to a different god. Like maybe it's Ptah, maybe it's Bastet, maybe it's Sekhmet. Maybe you're appeasing Sekhmet. Maybe you're praying that Set won't come this year and like destroy all your crops. And so because we know the location position of the Egyptian cities, well, you know what? Our Egyptian, let's say, he was born in Memphis. So you give him like a location and a region. And you can say what he probably did as he's growing up. You know, he's working the land, farming barley. Because Egyptians were big on beer. Like Nile River water, not that great to drink. What Egyptians did instead of drinking water was they drank beer. So beer was typically drunk. A very weak form of beer was typically drunk for all sorts of for all hydration. So all hydration was done through beer, which is really funny, considering that we know now that beer is a dehydrating agent. But no, Egyptians, they love their beer. It was a really weak form of beer. Basically, they fermented it just to get rid of all the bad bacteria that was in the. They didn't know what bacteria was. They just sort of had a way of making beer. And they used to drink it through straw. So they would get straws, and they would drink it like that. Well, basically, and because irrigation, because the river water goes up past the irrigation, there's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of bugs, and like, listen, the Nile is also like, it's also your sewage solution. You don't necessarily want to drink it, and like animals poop in it and stuff. So what they would have noticed is that like people get sick when they drink it. But what they found was that if they turn the water into beer, it's actually safer to drink. So beer was free and readily available, basically. And so, but the way the Egyptians would have thought of it was probably like, they wouldn't think of it as making beer, as like going down to the pub and making beer. They would have thought of it as purifying the water with barley. So they would purify the water with barley and then drink it. So you can also give like him like an occupation, like maybe he learned masonry to help maintain one of these old temples, because one of these old temples like these have to be maintained. So you can see like, oh well, this is where Hem worked, like you know, when he was a young adult. Maybe he traded some of his old barley stock, and then like, you know, he'd meet a trader from Nefer, a city that exists in Upper Egypt. And he'd give that jewelry to Shet for a dowry. Maybe Hem likes to play Senet. Maybe he likes to look at the stars at night. Maybe he likes to wonder at the gods, like, you know, which god is he most devoted to? And you can conscript Hem, like, you know, later in his life, maybe in his 20s or 30s, because people used to die around the age of 40. So. You know, he's conscripted to fight the sea peoples in the Pharaoh's army, you know, sometime later in his life. Now you compare that fictional account to a pretty relatable Mason in Egypt to the actual real story of Ramses III, and you can see why Ramses is it's a little bit harder to relate to. So this is all true, okay? This is what Ramses actually did, according to his accounts. So Ramses was born in the 20th dynasty in the New Kingdom of Egypt. Egypt had been around for 2,800 years historically so far. He's long after the period of the pyramids. He's long after the period of the ancients, and he was born under Amun-Ra. His rulership was marked, so when he ascended the throne, and he didn't ascend the throne after Ramses II, he's a distant cousin of Ramses II. But when he ascended the throne, his nation was in a state of constant warfare. So he would have to conscript people from various towns to defend against unruly governors, and there was a rising, I think, Hittite invasion coming from the north. During Ramses' reign, there was the Bronze Age collapse, a period of global unrest which culminated in a great migratory period for a people called the Sea Peoples, who came across from the Strait of Italy to invade Egypt. The Bronze Age collapse was also the end of the Hittite Empire, so the Turks completely wiped out. Like, every single one of their cities was sacked and ruined. And the Sea Peoples landed on the Nile Delta in Lower Egypt, right in the gaping maw of Ramses III and his mighty chariots. The Sea Peoples and Ramses III had a war of extermination, where the Sea Peoples were trying to exterminate the Egyptians. But the only thing stopping them was Ramses III and his utmost devotion to Amun-Ra, where he summoned all the powers of all the gods of chaos and order, to decimate the Sea Peoples. But what he found when he decimated them was that the Sea Peoples were actually desperate. They were desperate men fighting a desperate battle, because they'd brought with them their wives and their children. Because it turned out that the Sea Peoples had nowhere to go. So after subjugating the Sea Peoples, Ramses resettled them in Canaan, a recently conquered territory that he'd gotten from the Assyrians under Sennacherib, I think. The Assyrian king Sennacherib had recently lost the territory of Canaan, which is otherwise known as the Hebrew Holy Land. And so Ramses III conquered the Sea Peoples, these pirates from across the sea, made them Egyptian civilians, settled them in Canaan, and then taxed them in order to fund his armies and to fund his great works. And even though his people were starving, Ramses III propagandized his people to his majesty and might, and praised the gods, every single one of them, with a mighty temple, where effigies of every great god was represented. He was eventually, as his political power waned in his later years, he was assassinated by none other than his own harem of wives, who plotted against him so that Ramses IV would rise to power. His body was then interred in the Valley of Kings, where he was mourned by his people and the gods alike. So that's the real story. That's the actual story of Ramses III. Which makes my fictional story of him look a little boring in comparison. But, I mean, learning the story of Ramses III doesn't really help you understand what being an Egyptian was like. So I typically like to think about, I typically like to know these stories of the great pharaohs to understand the political machinations of the day. But when I think about ancient Egypt, I prefer to think more about people on the ground like Hem, because people like Hem make the Egyptian lifestyle more accessible to me. This one's easy. Hey Twiley, how's it going? So Wolfie did. Come on, Wolfie, you know this one. You know.
I swear to God, it's easy. He says.
This one's easy. All right. So the last couple slides I have is really about like what did Egyptians think about? Because we know more or less like what Egyptians did for a living. You know, they're farmers and they're crafters, and they got coerced into building a pyramid. Oh, but by the way, being on the pyramid troop was actually a pretty good deal because you got paid. So like the pyramid was essentially like a government job that you would get, and you do it for 6 months of the year, and it's fully paid. You get like a whole bunch of the pharaoh's wheat for doing it, and effectively you and everyone else in the nation just has to like carve these giant blocks and drag them from Giza to the pyramid site and stack the blocks on top of each other. And you stack it higher and higher, and eventually you get your pyramid. So we know what these Egyptians did, right? And we know roughly like how they interacted with each other. We know what games they played. We they played a bunch of board games and role-playing games, basically. We know what their science and their technology said. But what did they think about? Like what did they write about? What did they tell stories to each other about? Other than like, you know, what happened at the Nile today, or like who's farming what, or who had the best harvest. And one of the ways to fill in the gaps, at least when it comes to, say, ethics and what an Egyptian would think is right, is describing their religion and their culture. And you can't. I already said there were 2,400 gods in ancient Egypt, and I wasn't exaggerating. But why polytheism? Like why is polytheism sort of more natural to the ancient mind than it is to us? Like, because when we think of, say, religion, we typically think of a monotheistic tradition. And when you think about the ancient world, polytheism actually makes a lot of sense, because in almost, I'm pretty sure in almost every primitive culture, they're all polytheistic. And the reason is because the ancient cultures had to deal with each other. How could it be that the god of the Nubians is the same as the god of the Thebans, is the same as the god of the people of Memphis, is the same as the god of, you know, the Assyrians, the same as the god of the Hittites? It's impossible. They must all be different gods. And so each city had a god as the patron god of the city. And when you think about two city-states interacting with each other, like in a war, so while the men fought the war on Earth, they fought the earthly battle, the gods were literally fighting a celestial battle in the sky for who deserves to rule the city. And then you have concepts of birth, and you have concepts of death, and you have concepts of mourning, and you have concepts of magic, like things that you can't describe, like medicine. Magic and medicine, like to an Egyptian, like when I say magic, what I actually mean is medicine. Because in the Egyptian medicinal system, like sometimes the medicine worked, and sometimes it didn't. And the difference is how much magical power your shaman has. Well, or at least how much Isis liked you. And it's very difficult to think that there's one god responsible for everything. So, oh, hello. Yeah.
Usagi-chan VTuber just raided with 8 new cheeses.
Hello, Usagi-chan VTuber. How's it going? So when you think about polytheism, it's like, how can the god responsible for alligators be the same as the god responsible for cats? Because alligators exclusively kill people. I'll just give you a shout out to Usagi-chan. There you go. How's your stream? And so you can sort of start to see why there are so many gods in ancient Egypt, because we're talking about a people that span 3,500 years, all these different nations interacting with all these different peoples, and migratory periods, all interacting in the one same space with all their definitions and names and traditional histories of all these different gods. Well, you can see why there's a couple thousand of them. There's just a lot of gods up there, you know? And this is also why there are so many gods of death. So there are so many gods of death, there are so many gods of life. And actually, one of the things that's interesting in our concept of Egypt is, at least when I was growing up, I was always taught that Egyptians were obsessed with death. And Wolfie, Mark, you probably have the same thing, that like, an Egyptian would spend his entire life preparing for death. And the reason we have that conception is actually because it's a survivorship bias, where we get most of our information about Egypt from Egyptian tombs. like the Egyptians were definitely the Egyptians definitely had death on the mind because they were surrounded by it. You know, they had short lifespans. They lived in a harsh environment full of warfare. But the Egyptians were also obsessed with life. There are just as many gods of farming and animals as there are gods of death. It's just that we don't hear about the gods of farming and animals because, well, we don't have any Egyptians around to ask what they believe in or what they do with their day-to-day life. So when I think about if I lived in ancient Egypt, would I be obsessed with my own death? Well, no. I wouldn't be, because I'd be too busy. I'd be too busy living to be concerned with like how I'm going to die or the nature of it. And it may well be that, you know, the pharaohs were obsessed with their legacies and their monuments or whatever. But is that really every Egyptian was obsessed with that? You know, it's unconvincing to me. So another reason the gods existed is obviously to explain the unexplainable. So how does the sun move across the sky? Why is the sky up there in the first place? What's holding the sky up? And so you know, every time you have an unexplainable event, you would have a tradition where there's a god named XYZ that does that for us, and you know that's the solution. And if you want the god to keep doing it, well they're going to need their sacrifices, aren't they? If you want a big harvest, well, you got to talk to Osiris because you know he's the god of the harvest. And why the gods? So why did the gods sometimes overlap? Well, they're sometimes overlapped because new immigrants bringing new ideas into the same area would share their stories, and both stories would persist into history. And the final thing I have on this slide is, how is a pharaoh different to a king? Like why don't we just call them kings? And indeed, when we first started investigating Egypt, we used to just call them the kings of Egypt. But what we learned eventually was that pharaoh. So pharaoh comes from the Egyptian word for great house. Okay, so like the man or woman of the great house was the pharaoh. And the great house is linearly related to a god. So the first god, who, depending on your creation myth, is either Ra or Osiris. The first god began the great house, and somewhere along the line of that, of that god's descendants is the current pharaoh, whoever they may be. By the way, there were female pharaohs. Pharaohs are not like patrilineal. It was just whoever had the most political power at the time became the pharaoh. Like whoever had the most power in the great house became the pharaoh. But while I say that like there were female pharaohs, it definitely wasn't the norm. There are only a few female pharaohs. Hey Wolfie. Hey Wolfie.
Yes.
Can you name any female pharaohs? There's one really famous one.
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra! Yeah, Cleopatra. One of these things about Cleopatra was so Cleopatra by ancestry was Greek, because Cleopatra was at the end of the last pharaonic dynasty, the Ptolemies. So when Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, he famously fell off his horse and died. And when Alexander the Great died, sorry?
It's always the horses.
It's always the horses.
Just can't be trusted.
So when Alexander the Great died, his empire split into like 4 or 3, and the Egyptians were taken over by the Ptolemies. One of his generals was Ptolemy, and Ptolemy's descendant was Cleopatra. And in order to in order for the Egyptians to understand how Alexander the Great conquered them, they linked Alexander the Great to a pharaoh. They say, oh, well, the pharaoh is now Alexander the Great because he has the great house, right? And he must be linked to Ra in like this like specific way. So that's how Ptolemy became pharaoh. Because the Egyptians they'd sort of, whoever you were, the Egyptians sort of adapted you into them. Except for the Romans who adapted the Egyptians harder, basically. So the Egyptians understood Alexander the Great as the pharaoh, and they understood like his death as like him being accepted back into back into the realm of the gods. And so when Cleopatra was around as a Roman citizen,
Cheese.
oh, hello, thank you, cheese, yeah.
Cheese.
Spirit Eater just threw a cheese.
Well, Spirit Eater, you're currently in a history stream with Karnak VT. Hello, pleased to meet you. Pleased to meet you. I play retro games and I also play piano. And this is Wolfie Moriko, local historian. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Cleopatra. So the interesting thing about Cleopatra is that women didn't have many rights in Rome. Like a woman in Rome couldn't start a business or couldn't rule. But an Egyptian woman could. So whenever it was suitable to Cleopatra, it said that Cleopatra was a Roman when it suited her, and she was an Egyptian when it suited her. Because whenever she had to be treated equally by a judge, Cleopatra was a Roman. But whenever she had to be treated, whenever she had to rule, whenever she had to start a business or rule her kingdom or whatever, she was an Egyptian. So in some ways, like women in Egypt had like more rights than other ancient societies, and in some ways they had less. Anyway, the thing I'm ranting on is how is a pharaoh different to a king? Well, a pharaoh is simply like a member of the great house. That's the first distance. That's the first difference. Is that they are the member of the great house, and the great house was started by a god. Typically Osiris or Atum or Amun or Ra or Aten. Those are typically the gods that started the pharaonic houses. The other way is that a pharaoh is not just a political ruler. A pharaoh is also a spiritual cleanser. So the point of the pharaoh is to every day he wakes up and he focuses his magical power to cleanse the spirits of his people. Because the pharaoh lived in his palace, but the pharaoh would spend most of his time at the temple with the high priests. And that's why my little pharaoh staff, if I show you my little pharaoh staff, yeah, my little pharaoh staff. This staff is the same staff that someone would use to beat linen, to beat impurities out of linen. Because in the same way that you can beat impurities out of cloth, you can also purify the souls of people so that they're ready for what's called the Duat. So the Kemet is the black land, that's the land of the living, and the Duat is the land of death. And Kemet Duat is the entirety of the cosmos. Cleopatra, yeah. All right, Wolfie, who is the god? Who is the god depicted?
Horus?
No.
Damn.
Horus's granddad.
Jeb?
Not Jeb, no.
Geb?
No, it's not Geb.
Ah,
It is Ra. Ra.
for goodness sake.
On his boat carrying the sun across the sky. Alright. No, you gotta get this one. All right, so this is the last slide. Actually, this is the last slide. So I've been studying the Egyptian culture and the Egyptian religion, and I have like a few stories from Egypt. So typically, what they thought of cosmology was they weren't obsessed with death. That's the first thing. What they were obsessed with was a concept called ma'at. And ma'at is balance. And isfet is the opposite of ma'at, which is chaos. Highway to the Milky Way. And ma'at and isfet are in perfect balance. And ma'at and isfet, they existed. They're sort of the natural way of things. Like the ma'at and isfet is sort of trivially true to the Egyptian. And so, like, how did creation happen? Well, basically, before everything, there was none. Nun. N-U-N. Nun. And the hieroglyph for nun is like NN. It's like nothing. Nothing at all. And in order to describe nun with like a thought or a word or a concept, it would not be nun, because I would have been able to describe it. It was like this undescribable primordial sea of nothingness. And from the nun came, all of a sudden, like bursting into creation because it willed itself into existence, was a single word. And that single word was Ptah. Ptah, the first god. Yay! And basically, like in this great black sea of nothingness, like this great black like ocean of origin, Ptah came out of like nowhere. Literally nowhere. Ptah being so powerful that the concept like of a god created itself. And Ptah realized that he was the counterbalance to Nu'un's nothingness. He was the order where Nu'un was the chaos. And that eventually Nu'un would subsume order. Nu'un would subsume Ptah and all created. And that at the moment of that subsumation, all of knowledge, all answers to all questions in the universe would have been answered. And so this was the general like idea of the creation of Ptah. Because a lot of people, when they interact with Egyptian gods and goddesses the first time, you might think Amun-Ra is the first god, but that's not true. Ptah was the first god, the god of creation. Yeah, so powerfully, he even created himself. So Ptah makes himself, and then what happens is Ptah creates some sort of light. He's like to be a something within Nu'un's nothing, and that light focuses itself, and then expands, and then from a pinprick of nothingness to light everywhere, that light becomes Atum. Atum, the order within the chaos. And from the chaos, another creature is born called Apep. And Apep, while Apep is a creation of something, Apep understands that there is a paradox at work, because everything is being built from Nu'un. Everything's being built from Nu'un, and Nu'un can exist without Ptah, but Ptah cannot exist without Nu'un. Oh, hello. Noxie, how's it going? How's it going? Everyone go follow the Nox King. How's it going, Nox King VT? We're in story time, Nox King VT. I'm saying the creation myth of the Egyptians. I hope you got your shout out. Did you get your shout out? You better. How's your stream, Nox? It's good to see you again. I love watching this guy's streams. They're so good. They're so good. Listen, Wolfie Moriko, it's illegal not to follow Nox King. Are you following Nox King VT, Wolfie Moriko? You better be. Go and click his name and give him a purple love heart.
I did.
Good.
This cat's scary.
Hyperfixating on June. Holy shit. Hey! See, Wolfie Moriko, I got you a follow too. Nox King just followed you. Yay! How you liking June so far, Nox? How you liking June? Nox's streams are good, yeah. Absolutely. When is Sensei going to talk about the alligators? Jesus. Slowbeck is in the next slide. Nox is a bird filled with evil. Jesus. Go and click on the heart, Wolfie. Yeah. Absolutely. I can't wait to play it myself. I love the June franchise. All right. Whew. Well, thank you for raiding, Noxie. If you got to go, I understand. But if you want to stick around, we're talking about the ancient Egypt creation myth. All right. So just to bring you up to speed, I've got to do a speed round. I've got to do a bit of a speed round of like the shit I was just talking about. All right. So setting the scene. There's none, and it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. But you can think of it like a black ocean. There's like a watery substance all around you. And from nothing, the first word was spoken, and that first word was Ptah. And Ptah, willing himself into existence, represented himself with a beam of light that spread out across Nun and became Atum. Okay, so we've got Nun, Ptah, and Atum. And slithering around Atum's perimeter was a giant serpent named Apep. And Apep realized that there is a paradox. There's a paradox of creation. And the paradox of creation is that Nun is able to exist without Ptah. Okay? Nun can exist without Ptah, but Ptah cannot exist without Nun. So eventually, Nun's going to win. Nun will eventually subsume Ptah. And that snake, calling itself Apep, decides to side with Nun instead of Ptah. And this is the first example of the Ma'at, where every piece of order must be counterbalanced by a piece of chaos. So Atum, representing order, and the serpent Apep, representing chaos, begin to fight. Apep wraps itself in its entirety around Atum and begins constricting it, and Atum is fighting it like in every direction. He's wrestling this giant serpent for thousands and thousands of years, just endlessly fighting it. And so they have a big battle, and eventually Atum is able to expand because Apep weakens, so like just a little bit. For just a little bit of time, Apep weakens. And Atum is freed to interact with the Nun, from which order can be created. And every time a god creates something out of the Nun, he uses a bit of its power, and the Nun subsumes him a little bit. So the gods get weaker as they create things. So when the god's the most powerful is before they've created anything at all. And the thing Atum creates, because in order to create something out of none, you just have to think of the concept and whisper it, and none will create it. Because none by itself isn't evil, but being subsumed into none is what a human would consider to be evil. And the thing that Atum creates is Shu. So because you have to imagine, like, Atum leans over and he, using his magic, whispers into the void. Arise, Shu! And so Shu is created. And Shu, because remember, there's no existence yet. Like Atum is just a concept of light. Ptah is just the thing that created them all. And Shu understands that he's wind, somehow. And looking around, Shu's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And before Shu can ask a question, Atum says something else. He says, "Arise, Tefnut." And Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, becomes the wife of Shu. So wind and moisture mingle together. True, Wolfie Moriko. No problem, Amy. No problem. All right. So Shu and Tefnut, they're like, well, we don't know what to do. And then a Pep comes in. He's like, what the fuck is this? Why are there more gods now? And a Pep's about to eat Shu and Tefnut. And Atum says, "Run, my children," and fights off a Pep. And so Shu and Tefnut run away. And they get lost in the Nun almost immediately because there's nowhere to go. There's no directions. There's no time. Actually, no. Sorry, there is time now. There is time. So this is the one thing Ptah created, as he created Atum, was he created time. True, M4. All right. So Atum realizes that by creating Shu and Tefnut, he's actually weakened himself because he feels a Pep's strangling hold around him is actually getting stronger and stronger, or like it's the same strength, whereas Atum is weaker. Realizing this, Atum creates something else, and this is going to be a bit weird. But Atum creates his eye. He creates the right eye of Atum. And the eye is itself a god, or goddess, because the eye is actually feminine. And the eye was named Hathor, I think. Anyway, he sends the eye off. He sends the eye off to go after his children. And then the eye eventually finds the children. But in the time that it took the eye to go and find the children, Atum was about to die to a Pep. And so Atum created his left eye, the masculine eye. And thus, male and female were sort of born into the world through this dichotomy of Atum. Bringing back Shu and Tefnut, the right eye found that the left eye, that she'd been replaced by this left eye, and so the right eye got a bit annoyed and said, well, I'm going into none where they actually appreciate me, because I don't appreciate being replaced. And then how does it go? I believe after this, Atum realizes that he needs an aspect of himself to go and convince the right eye to come back. And thus Thoth is born. And Thoth, so where Atum is the light, Thoth is the moon. He is the lesser aspect of Atum. But what he's given is all the knowledge and every secret to the universe. Like Ptah grants him this. And Thoth goes off to find the right eye of Atum. Eventually, Thoth finds the right eye of Atum.
Cheese.
And after hundreds of years, oh hello.
Cheese.
Thank you for the cheese.
Cheese.
Yeah.
__ just through a cheese.
Hello, Weltoner. Thank you. Pleased to meet you. So, Thoth goes off to find the right eye of Atum. Brings it back. And like the Thoth and the right eye of Atum, they become good friends. And Thoth debates the right eye of Atum for like many hundreds of years in order to get it back. And then as Thoth brings the right eye of Atum back to Atum plops it in. And then with his eyes combined, finally, he's able to fight off a pep. And thus, men and women are stronger together. And so after we've gotten through all this like cosmological dreamlike creation myth, now we get to what happens next. With the pep fought off, Shu and Tefnut, the god of wind and the goddess of moisture, are finally able to intermingle. And they have two children. Geb, the god of earth, and Nut, the god of the sky. And Geb and Nut love each other. Like they are deeply in love with each other. So much so that they will never separate. Like Geb and Nut, they are just linked. But Atum realizes that there's a problem with Geb and Nut being linked like this.
Cheese. Cheese.
In that, oh hello.
Cheese. Cheese. Cheese.
Hornmaster 4 just through a cheese.
Thank you, Hornmaster 4. Thank you for the cheese. Thank you for the cheese. Pleased to meet you. I'm say so. What the hell? But listen, the next part of the myth ain't so say so. Okay. So Geb and Nut basically, Atum realizes that Nut has already given birth to more gods and more creatures, but because Geb is wrapped around her so tightly, they can't come out of her womb. Basically, there's no way for the creatures to go. And so Aten, with a heavy heart, commands, Atum. Atum commands his child, Shu, and Tefnut. He commands these two to lift Nut as high as they can. And so Nut is lifted into the sky, and her children fall out of her. And thus, Geb becomes the world on which we'll live. It becomes eventually Kemet. And Nut becomes the mighty sky above. And everything outside of Geb and Tefnut becomes known as the Nun. So seeing that all this is made, Atum makes the final decision of his like sort of cosmological godhood, and creates himself, the light of Ptah, formed in a single being known as Amun-Ra. And thus, Ra, the god of the sun, is born. Oh. Hello, Maximum Joker. Good to see you. Holy shit. Yeah.
Maximum Joker 869 just joined Team Pyramid.
How's Hearthstone going? Thank you for the 16 months. It's so good. Holy shit. Are you winning, son? Are you doing well? Anyway, so Ra, realizing his importance of like guiding the sun across the sky, declares himself king of the gods, and says, "Look, All you gods, you've got to guide creation now. You've got to create all things that are good and orderly, and we have to work together to fight off the Pep and the minions of chaos as long as possible. But for every god that's created, a counter god of chaos will also be born. So we have to be constantly vigilant, because the one universal law of everything is that the Ma'at cannot be broken. Hearthstone's Pain been doing PvE adventures here in RNG Agony. Oh no. You can do this, Max. You have a titanic brain. All right. So I think
Titanic brain.
he has a titanic brain for card games.
Didn't that sink to the floor?
All right.
Just ignore me.
It's okay. So with Kemet created and Duat being outside of it, with the sun over the head, with Shu and Tefnut creating the rains, we're living on Geb and underneath the motherly presence of Nut. This is where Amun-Ra's tears first flowed. And from those tears, because remember, water is very important to Egyptians, from those tears were birthed humans. And the Geb and Nut's 4 children, Osiris, Isis, Nephthys, and Set, were then decreed to be the rulers of Kemet and the lands outside of Kemet. Osiris and Isis, that's Big Green and the Maiden of Magic, they were to rule Kemet. Nephthys and Set, they were to rule the foreign lands. The goddess of morning and the god of chaos. And essentially, what happened was Osiris led his people as the first pharaoh in a mighty way. He was a powerful, wise, and benevolent ruler. And his sister Isis was the goddess of magic and healing and motherhood. And it's important to know that, like, when gods and goddesses are married, these are marriages of concepts. So Osiris as a ruler should have magic, like at his side. This is the important point in the myth. And the way the Osiris myth goes, because the Osiris myth is central to most of Egyptian understanding, at least a political understanding, is that Nephthys was in love with Osiris, and eventually what happened is that Nephthys, the goddess of mourning, so remember she's the goddess of mourning and tears. Nephthys also came back to Kemet. And eventually she was also wed to Osiris. And Set, finding that his wife was taken from him, was infuriated. And essentially Set, in a blind rage. Hello Mitsukami, how's it going? In a blind rage, upon seeing his wife betray him like this, decided in that moment that he was going to trick his brother Osiris by I forget exactly how he did it, but he effectively there was a big party of all the gods of Egypt, because all the animals get their own god to create them and run in their domains. So this is where you get your Sobek and you get Kek and you get all the other animal gods. And Set, he gathered all the gods for a large party in Osiris's honor, and he praised Osiris as the first, like among brothers and sisters. Osiris was the first pharaoh. He was the first in Isis's heart, the first among Amun-Ra's children, and in the final moments of his speech, Set declared that Osiris would be the first god to die. And so what happened was Set tricked Osiris to go to lie in a coffin, because nobody believed that Set could kill Osiris. And Set drove a dagger. I believe it was a special dagger he drove into Osiris's heart, and then obliterated Osiris's limbs in every possible direction. And then Osiris's spirit was then condemned to a place where no god had been before, the Duat. And Osiris was killed. Mourning for his son, Ra, Amun-Ra, steered his boat across the horizon, across all of Nut, and down below Geb. So Ra killed himself. He went, because when the sun travels below the horizon, you're going into the Duat. When you enter the Duat, you die. That's what it means to die. It means to enter the Duat. So when Ra goes across the horizon and down underneath, Ra dies. And of course, because Ra is very powerful and magical, Ra can obviously, he can resurrect himself. But in this particular time, just after Set kills Osiris's soul parts they're spread all over the Duat, and so Set, after installing himself as the ruler of Egypt, installs himself over a land of darkness, because there is no sun as long as Set is the pharaoh of Egypt. And Ra spends all of his time in the Duat reconstructing his son Osiris. And Isis and Nephthys become the wives of Set. Now eventually the way this goes is that Set, Isis and Nephthys work together, I think. Isis and Nephthys work together, and from the Nile, they figure out a way to resurrect Osiris. And so they go to a temple, and they manage to resurrect Osiris. I think by sacrificing Nephthys, they resurrect Osiris, but I'm not sure on the specifics. And with Osiris back, the first thing Osiris does, overjoyed to see Isis again, is they conceive a child, and then Isis runs away, as Set comes back to obliterate Osiris once more. But I remember. Sorry, I forgot a key part of the story. So what they had to do to resurrect Osiris was they had to find all the body parts that were obliterated by Set, and so all the gods worked together to find the left finger of Osiris and the 14th hair follicle. And then when they reconstructed Osiris, what they did was they had to wrap him. They had to wrap him in these holy wrappings. And so Osiris, as well as being the first pharaoh and the first to die, was also the first mummy. And mummification was actually it became the way of looking after the dead, because Osiris came back as a mummy. And so Isis's child is conceived as soon as Osiris is resurrected, and then Set comes along, and Osiris and Set have a big biffo, and Set kills Osiris once more. But this time, because he's wrapped up properly, his soul doesn't get obliterated, and his soul is able to reside in one piece in the Duat, and thus Osiris, which is back here, Osiris is the pharaoh of the dead, which is why it looks like that. And thus, while there is a pharaoh in Kemet, there is a pharaoh in the Duat, and the Ma'at, the universal law of order and the universal law of balance, is preserved. And thus, Amun-Ra sees that while this tragedy that's befallen his family is indeed a tragedy, it must have always been like this. Because the fact that there wasn't a pharaoh in the Duat was a problem that the Ma'at asserted must be resolved. And thus, with a heavy heart, Ra realizes that the only way to see his son, and all of the gods who will one day die, is to die himself. And thus, Ra, on a cycle of 24 hours, will visit the Kemet and the Duat. The sun will rise and the sun will set. Alright, so the child Isis had was Horus. And basically Horus, with the help of Thoth, and he has a big adventure. And he drives Set out of Egypt and into the foreign lands, where Set's rage will gather constant windstorms and gather people into a frenzy to try and conquer Egypt from North Africa. And one day, as a pep wrapped around a tomb, first conceived, one day a pep will win. One day a pep will return, coiled around Atum, and will eventually find a way to destroy everything and destroy the world. And this is a pep's promise as well as the destiny for humanity. But before then, Ptah will have realized that the answer to the universe, which he will share with all the people residing in Kemet and Duat. And this is more or less Egyptian mythology, as I've described it. And that's my presentation.
Good.
Well, thank you.
Did your research?
I did do my research. Now, if you want books about ancient Egypt, I recommend there's a few YouTube series that are really good that go over the political history. But... Oops. Yeah. So you got this. Complete Gods and Goddesses of Ancient Egypt. This is a good place to start. Well, it's not. This is a terrible place to start. Like, because you just open a random page. You open a random page and you get like, okay, well, there's a celestial ferryman. Okay, what's he do? And then you find out some stuff about him. Oh, look, here's Ptah. Is old Ptah. So this is sort of like an index. Like, okay, I've heard of this guy. Like what did he do? And then you'll get like a Middle Kingdom look at Ptah. But if you want to know the political and social history of Egypt, this series is really good. Wow. This is all available on Amazon. Basically, it's a series of 3 books, and the 3 books are all titled "A History of Ancient Egypt." And there's a book for the Old Kingdom. So this is about the pyramids. There's a book about the Middle Kingdom, the Theban monarchy, and there's a book about the end. Oh wait, no, this is the Middle Kingdom. Sorry, and the Theban monarchy. This is the New Kingdom. But what I really recommend is most of that stuff about ancient Egyptian mythology. Look, this is just a good book, okay? So Egyptian Mythology by Scott Lewis, really, really good. It basically, the story I told you about Ptah, Atum, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, and all them, it's all contained inside this book. I was basically paraphrasing this book, like as I was recounting it. It sort of puts all the characters of the Egyptian mythos into like a story, which is like more easily digestible than like a listing of gods and like their artifacts. So I recommend this book.
I'm gonna share some good YouTube stuff.
Yeah, sure.
In your internet share on the server.
Yeah,
as
of
well.
course.
There's like a 6-hour like docu-series
Oh, Jesus.
about it.
All right. Does anyone have questions about ancient Egypt? That's an introductory session. I tried to fit most of it in. Most of my knowledge.
You did a really good job.
Oh, thank you.
Like a really, really, really good job.
Thank God.
Oh, Crash Course is really good to watch if you just want to get a basic idea.
Absolutely. Also, I tried to be accurate, but obviously, like, yeah, I'm not a historian. I'm an amateur, so I could have just gotten shit wrong.
I mean, you did your reading. You know. I trust you.
I consolidated the information. I just might have gotten it wrong. All right. Oh, by the way, the last god on the last slide was Thoth.
See, I got that right,
You-
but you didn't ask me. I was waiting. I was like, I know it.
You know it. You know it.
I know it. And he didn't even ask me. Outrageous.
Yeah, Thoth, god of the moon and god of knowledge.
God of the moon.
One of the interesting.
Although I will
yeah.
say, I will say, obviously you mentioned the obsession with death with the ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, in ancient Egypt. Well, obviously my area of expertise is the Victorians, and they had also a very strange relationship with the concept of death.
Oh yeah.
Which we can see through a particular thing called Memento Mori. Do you know what that is?
No, no, heard of it. What is it?
So Memento Mori is essentially, let me try and get the definition right so I don't make a mess. Like, Memento Mori. So it's a Latin phrase which translates to "remember you must die."
Okay.
It's a concept that has been used throughout history to remind individuals of the inevitability of death.
Yes.
And it basically offers inspiration of greater appreciation for the present and to focus on, living a meaningful life.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's more of an artistic trope when it comes to Victorians, but we can see it through jewelry pieces that have like locks of hair in, pieces of art that were created to remember someone by. But also, if you look at a picture of a Victorian, especially when it's like a group photo,
Yeah.
there is a high percentage that at least one person in that photo is actually dead.
Oh, really?
And they've just propped them up to take a photo for one last time, essentially to remember them. There's a lot of cases of children being photographed dead.
Oh, that makes sense.
They had this, it was just a massive thing back then. But when they was going to, obviously when the historians and archaeologists went over to Egypt to kind of start looking at the tombs, etc., and the mummies started getting brought over back to here, there was actually a weird obsession with drinking, like
Oh yeah,
from the
yeah.
mummies.
Mummy medicine. That was
Yeah.
You know, the Victorians. The
Crazy.
Victorians aren't the first people who thought of that. Mummified cats. Oh, sorry.
Yes, mummified
Yeah,
cats. Yeah.
mummified cats. I'll just refresh the call. Hang on. I find refreshing the call helps us. Hello.
He's back.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Mummified cats were found by the Romans, and they described like eating mummified cat as like medicine, because they thought the Egyptian magic was like there's like an exotic medicine from the Orient to heal any ailment.
I wonder if this is where like taxidermy started coming into effect.
Oh yeah, well, I mean,
Like the obsession with kind of preserving things.
yeah. Well, I mean, preservation was a big part of it. Was a big part of Egyptians.
Yeah.
It is beautiful, Wise Beast. I agree.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's Christmassy.
Yeah.
That's my specialty.
Probably one of the most interesting pharaohs. Have you ever heard of a guy wolf pharaoh called Akhenaten?
haven't.
Okay. So he was the son of. So what are the pharaoh names? Pharaoh names are they're god names. Like you have the it's the same as like kings have like a coronation name.
Yes.
Yeah. So pharaoh names are similar. It's like you have your name or whatever it is. Most of them are lost to history, and then when you become the pharaoh, the leader of the great house, you take on your god name. And so Ramesses, in praise of Ra. So Ramses, well, one of the most famous pharaoh names is Ramses. That means in praise of Ra. And Tutankhamun, I don't know what Tutan means, but he's from Amun, which is the other aspect of Ra, because it's Amun Ra. And so you have this weird guy in a long list of like Ra's. You have like Ramesses, Akhenaten, and then Tutankhamun. So who the fuck is this Akhenaten guy? And Akhenaten is a really weird guy because when he picked his pharaoh name, he picked this weird ass god called Aten. And if you want a depiction of Aten, because Egyptian gods came in three flavors: human shaped, or like pharaoh like; animal shaped, so they had a domain over like some animal or something; and then conceptual. So Nut and Ged, the god of earth and the goddess of the sky, they weren't depicted as humans. They weren't depicted as animals. They were depicted as these amorphic things. And Aten he's in the third category of god. He's in the amorphic. So the way you depict Aten is a giant golden circle with a bunch of hands coming out of it.
Oh.
Cool. So the weird thing about Akhenaten is Akhenaten was the first heretic in recorded history.
Oh.
Because Akhenaten, after his father conquered, I think it was the Hittites. He had some big wins. He had some big wins against the Hittites, and then he decided, you know what? Aten came to me in a dream. I've been doing a bit of sun gazing, and I've decided all this Ra stuff is nonsense. There ain't no Horus, there ain't no Ra. There's only one god, and that god's name is Aten. So he built a whole bunch of temples to Aten. And his heresy was so deep that after Aten was, because Aten's political power waned, and Egypt lost a major ally in the war against the Hittites. So Aten's political power waned, and a bunch of his temples were destroyed. And Aten's name was almost scrubbed from history by Tutankhamun. Because Tutankhamun's first act was to reinstate the cult of Ra, and basically try and scrub his father's name from history. So they desecrated his tomb. They destroyed most of his temples. They turned everything into rubble. And the only way we know about Akhenaten is because they missed the spot, basically. That's how we learned about him. The other interesting thing about Akhenaten is that where most pharaohs, when they depicted themselves in propaganda and art, they're like strong and powerful, and they're like conquering people and beheading people and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Akhenaten, kind of different, because a lot of Akhenaten's artwork is about family scenes, and he's fat. He's got a little pork belly for some reason. Because I guess that's like he just ordered his artists to actually depict him properly. So it's one of the most interesting pharaohs there is. At least to me.
At least to you.
Yeah, I think the Ramses are pretty interesting themselves. But you know, to be honest, don't know that much about the pharaohs. There are like 30 freaking dynasties of them, so there's a lot to read about.
Yeah.
Also, all the names sort of like meld into each other, especially because like most of these are like 1 or 2 syllables, and it's like these aren't normal names to us. So it's like, I was even struggling in the mythology section. I'm like, all right, Shu is married to Tefnut, who's the mother of Nut.
Nut. Cough it up.
Yeah, I've been talking for 2 hours.
You have. I am actually very proud of you.
I'll have you know, I was a lecturer in mathematics.
Right.
Egypt is more interesting than math, though. All right, chat. Do you have any questions about ancient Egypt? I got that because I've got some answers. Maybe.
How do you spell jewelry?
Jewelry. Jewelry.
Nope.
There's a few more L's and E's in there, probably.
Oh, there was 2 L's. We nearly had it.
All right. I'm going to pass you guys on. I'm going to pass you on. Or I'm going to pass you. Pip and Otter. Let's go see Pip and Otter. Thank you for coming, everybody. Thank you for coming. The VOD is available.
Thank you.
The VOD is available on YouTube if you missed it. So you can get the whole presentation. And me zipping on about Tefs and Nuts and Osirises and Byruses and Zisises.
Our stream was actually like really close to the top of the ancient Egypt history search when I looked up some
Oh,
videos.
Jesus. Cool.
We were there.
Yay! Alrighty. Let's go give a raid to our otter friend. Thanks for coming. I can see chats. Sophie, how's it going? I was busy picking a raid, jeez. Bye for now. Thank you so much.
Bye, Alicia.